Come on, 7. Oh, snake eyes again. Hey, rolling some dice there. Hey, students, welcome back. If you check out why we were rolling dice the other day, some of the things that we've been doing in class, we have started with some of the concepts of atoms, molecules, how atoms are put together, and a difficult concept when you're just starting to learn about atoms, radioactive decay. And the reason we've been talking about it is because of the various ways we use radiation in medicine. We use it for things like batteries in spaceships that are like Voyager right now is sending information still to us because of a radioactively decaying element. And we're going to talk about why that's important to know about and how that hard concept at the beginning of the year we come back to again and again throughout the year. So let's go through today's notes, check out a little bit of what's on the board, talk about why we have some dice. There's a famous line from Einstein, you've probably heard it before. Einstein said, I don't think that God plays dice. And part of what Einstein meant when he talked about this was the way that we know the physical laws of the universe, we should be able to make accurate predictions based on those physical laws. Radioactive decay is a perfect example of that. Radioactive decay kind of falls under the quantum mechanics idea of probabilities. Now, if that sounds complicated, let's make it a little bit simpler. And I cannot stress enough how good this video is, twisting the dragon's tail. In this picture right here, Dr. Derek Muller is in Ukraine, and he is in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. It's a place where there was a huge accident in 1986 that spread radiation over vast areas of Europe and really around the world, but especially concentrated around parts of Europe. When you look at the soccer balls that he has right here, they were representing radioactive cesium. And here's the dice tie-in. When you look at the radioactive decay, if all of these elements are going to decay, if it's in this case cesium, you're looking at, say, this one right here. My finger's on one particular soccer ball, one particular atom that's radioactive. I can't tell you if it's going to decay right in 10 minutes or in 1,000 years, but I can tell you that it will. However, if you get a whole bunch of them together at the same place, at the same time, you can say, hey, I've got this chunk of cesium. I know that in a certain amount of time, half of them will decay. I just don't know which ones. That's the dice part. That's the probability part. Again, Einstein would have said, well, wait, if we know everything there is to know about that atom, we can tell. And Bohr and other scientists were like, no, you can't tell. It's a statistics thing, the dice part. That's a fascinating thing, and it also is one of the reasons why Chernobyl, the area around it, is still unlivable, because there are radioactive elements that have half-lives of thousands of years that are still decaying and releasing their radiation. So as we transition out of radiation this week, we're learning a little bit about microscopes. And when you look at the microscope we've got right here, we're teaching students about how to hold this one. Now, this is what I've been using for a demonstration one for a long time. But we always hold it, of course, by the arm. We don't pick it up by the tube here or by the lens. And we hold it usually by the base. Now, realistically in class, most of the time the microscopes are going to be planted on a countertop. There's not going to be much occasion for students to move them around, but occasionally they might have to adjust them a little bit. And we're teaching a little bit about the coarse adjustment, the fine adjustment, the stage upon which we put specimens, and the base. And again, we hold it by the arm and the base to keep them safe. And that gets to these notes up here about lenses. I also like to include in this one, when we talk a little bit about lenses, comparing, contrasting microscopes and telescopes, because again, we get into telescopes later on in the year. So let me turn off the screen here for a second and get into the first part of the notes today. Over here when we talk about telescopes, and by the way, this will all feed in when we see our unit on the Martian, which we'll hit in about a week or so here. When we check out the unit on the Martian, we talk about radio telescopes, for example, and the speed of light, again, comes into play when we're talking about communication, say, between Earth and Mars. But the most important part for the students today, the nitty-gritty about what is due for the students, is the vocabulary terms. Again, we're starting on a Tuesday this week, and we still have our vocabulary terms up on the board. A microscope, both light and electron microscope, we're talking about the difference between them, comparing, contrasting. Reflector, refractor, and radio telescopes. That's part of our vocab as well. We'll be seeing those a little bit more tomorrow. Lenses, of course, lenses, both in light microscopes and in light telescopes. Not radio telescopes, but light telescopes. We're going to be seeing how lenses both refract the light and how we use mirrors to reflect the light to get the image focused upon either our eye, an eyepiece, an objective, or on a film. So if we're taking pictures in astronomy. Over here, convex and concave, we're going to check out the path that light takes through each of those types of lenses. Focal point, again, this also will come into play later in the year when we're talking about how our eyes work, and especially when the scientists come on by with this sheep eye, which we're going to dissect later on this year. We're going to check out the way eyes sometimes need corrective lenses like this, so it changes the focal point of light, and we can actually see if we have it slightly corrected. Moving on from there, our last little bit of notes that we didn't quite get to today. This is going to be the next board you see will be our jumping off place tomorrow, but I wanted to get it up on the board today. We had boiling water at the back of the room, demonstration, which we'll start off with tomorrow. We didn't quite get to it today, but basically it's going to be our stand-in for a nuclear power plant. A nuclear power plant is essentially a big tea kettle. We're going to look at why nuclear power, the pros and cons of nuclear power. Certainly the pros are not as many global warming gases get released. Certainly the cons are going to be what we're seeing on twisting the dragon's tail, the potential for accidents like in Pripyat and Chernobyl, and a new generation of reactors that's coming online that isn't nearly as dangerous as the previous generation of reactors. And then finally, when we're looking at the way we use radiation in medicine, for example, PET scans, and we're looking at what's inside a person's body, positron emission. We're looking at the way a radioactive element can be given to a patient, and as it releases its radiation, we can take an image with that. And of course, if you've been to the dentist or doctor and had an x-ray, application right there of radiation being used in medicine. And finally, cancer treatments, when we're looking at focusing gamma rays, for example, on a tumor and destroying specifically the tumor cells and not bathing the patient in radiation, which will potentially cause mutations in DNA. So lots of tie-ins now as we kind of slowly transition from our study of atoms and the way they're put together in radioactive half-life, and we transition into talking about cells and how radiation affects DNA. That's where I'll leave it today. Make sure you get those vocab terms done. Look for the notes online, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye-bye.